Welcome back, everyone, to the High Vibe Life podcast. I am your host, Lisa Holton, and today we have a guest on, and I'm very excited to bring you John Briggs. John has been on our podcast before, actually about 2 years ago or so. He came on because he wrote his first book, First For Microgyms. So we talked all about that. But John now has a second book out. I'm super excited about it, and I can't wait to bring it to you. But first, John is he's an amazing guy. He's the founder of Incite Tax. He wears some really super fun t-shirts. So make sure to follow him on Instagram to see those shirts. And you'll be able to see him here on YouTube as well. He again wrote the first book, Profit First for Microgyms, which if you are a gym owner or a personal trainer, make sure you grab that book because it will really be eye-opening for you. And he has helped to build an amazing team of non-traditional accountants to help combat the IRS bullying and change the accounting industry from within, which I love. I think that's super funny. We all want to keep our money. Let's be real. And so today, though, we are going to talk about his new book, which is the 33 rule or the 3.3 rule. Which one is it, John?
The 3.3 rule.
Okay, the 3.3 rule. I want to hear, what is that rule? And then how did you come up with this idea?
Okay. So let me start with a little quick story. There's a little girl. They're in this family gathering, and all her and her mom and the grandma are all in the kitchen getting dinner ready. And her mom chops off the ends of a pot roast and puts it in the oven. And she, curious girls, if you guys, kids in general, but right, she's very curious. All they do is ask questions. Hey, mom, how come you cut off the ends of the pot roast? And she thinks about it. I don't know. That's how my mom taught me. And grandma's right there. So she says, hey, grandma, why did you teach my mom to cut the ends of the pot roast? And she paused and she said, I don't know either. That's how my mom taught me. It just so happens that great grandma Gertrude is sitting out on the porch on a rocking chair, enjoying life. So little girl goes up and goes, Granny Gertrude, why did you teach your daughter, which then subsequently taught my mom, to cut the ends of the pot roast? Is it a secret family recipe? Does it release the juices? And Granny Gertrude, without hesitation, says, my pot roast pan was too small. So a behavior got passed down from generation to generation when the people who received the teaching didn't even know what the context was of why that behavior was specifically taught. Think about that in terms of the way we work. The 8-hour workday, the 40-hour work week. Most people don't realize that our 40-hour work week and 8-hour workday was popularized by Henry Ford back in the early 1900s. So we're talking 100 years ago. At that time, working 80 to 100 hours a week was normal. And he's selling cars. You know what people don't need when they're working 80 to 100 hours a week? They don't need cars, because when they have the few minutes of life off from work, they're too exhausted to do anything. So he had a big production, right? He had a lot of employees. He thought, man, I could sell more cars even if my own employees were the ones buying them because they had more time. So he was kind of villainized at the time. Instead of doing the 80 to 100 hours and 10-hour days and 6 days a week, he's like, okay, guys, I'm changing your shift to 8 hours a day, and I'm going to give you 2 days at the end of the week. Like, he basically created what we now call the weekend. And that's how the 40-hour work week happened. There was no science behind that. There's no human behavior behind that. It's simply because he wanted to sell more cars. Yet here we are 100 years later, and think about all the things and how we've adapted and changed, and how we went from industrial age working to being a knowledge worker. Yet we're still doing 8-hour work days, 40 hours a week. So the 3.3 rule comes in because it's based on science, and it states the most efficient workday consists of working up to 3 hours at a time, followed by a 30% recovery period.
I like that. And I think that's so true. I know for myself, being, a small business owner, I know that I can go hard for only like a couple of hours. And then I need to like back off and do something else. Otherwise, like my creativity drains, I can't focus. I just get bored with what I'm doing. So I thought that was just like a me thing, but I like that it's not just a me thing. I like that it's science backed.
Yeah. Science literally supports you. So the Princeton Neurological Institute actually did a study, and they show that our brains naturally cycle from a state of focus to a state of distractibility, and it goes through this wave cycle like throughout the day. There's also a guy, his name is Alejandro Yeras. He did a study at the University of Illinois in Champaign, and at the time, people were kind of talking about attention span and how do we get on top of this attention span and how do we exercise that type of thing. He's like, his hypothesis was, I don't know if there's a span. Our attention is always on something. It just may not be on the thing that we initially thought or wanted it to be on. So he took that kind of frustration and hypothesis and then also looked at a study that talked about physical sensations. Our bodies, with a constant stimulus, will neutralize that stimulus. For example, think about the clothes that we're wearing. Until I said anything, you weren't thinking about it. Now, as you wiggle a little bit, you can kind of feel how the fabric rubs on your skin. Well, it's because as soon as we put the clothes on, our brain neutralizes that stimulus. Studies show you can stare at an object, and if you stare at it long enough, it'll actually disappear from your vision. So he's like, I wonder if the same thing applies to our attention, to our ability to focus. So he did a study, and sure enough, he found that the constant stimulus of the same thing to our brain, focusing on the same thing for too long, our brain will naturally neutralize that stimulus. And that's why what you talked about, you kind of go through like, man, I don't understand why I'm having a hard time focusing. And is it just me? No, your brain's saying like, hey, I've had the same stimulus, I need a break. And that's the solution, that the break allows people to reset and come back more efficient.
Oh, I love that. So the break for me, I'll just talk about what I do, and then you can tell me what you would recommend for other people. But the break for me is like, I'm going to work on, say, this project that requires a lot of focus for a duration of time. Usually I'm good at like 2 hours and then I have to be done. So I'll do like 2 hours. And then I'm going to go for a walk outside, or I'm going to go read a book for 20 minutes. It's like I have to do something that doesn't literally require like my brain to function in order for me to like come back. So is that part of it? Yeah. Or what would you recommend for some people?
Yeah, you nailed it. Those are things on my list. Actually, one of the guys I've already taught this rule to, and he's been using it for a while. He's like, dude, I got to tell you, I'm down 20 pounds. I'm like, what? Because of my rule? He's like, yeah, because of the 3.3 rule. I'm like, okay, well, tell me about it. So most of us feel guilty when we're like, I got so much work to do. I got to work. How could I possibly get up and do something that's not work? I have so much to do, right? He's like, your rule gave me the permission I needed. So he works 3 hours. He goes 9 to 12. And then in the afternoon, so 30% of that is a full hour off. So he takes a full hour break. And on that break, he walks 2 miles. He loves walking, and it's a perfect way to reset because you're not stimulating your brain on the work things, right? And because he now gets 2 miles of walking in the middle of the day, it's healthy, right? But then he finds that afternoon like lethargic hit that most people experience after eating lunch. He's not tired in the afternoon, which then allows him to not take a nap earlier before going to bed. So he goes to bed like not having had that nap. So now he sleeps better. Like all these different health things have come for him because he decided to use walking in his break. So for a couple things for sure we don't want to do. If I'm like, as a tax person, if I'm doing tax returns, my break, a bad break would be looking at my email. That's still work, right? I'm not saying like you should then if I'm doing this task, I'm now going to the next task. And that's a break. It's a different stimulus. No, that doesn't work. Playing some of those addicting app things on your phone also does not help your brain reset. So getting away from electronics during your break time is recommended. Walking is awesome. If you work with other people, try pairing up your breaks with theirs. And now you have permission to just talk about whatever the heck you want. Like enjoy each other, get to know each other. Lots of anything creative for most people is going to be a really great thing. So using a book to kind of escape and just read a story and your brain's envisioning kind of the story is great. Some people draw. Journaling is also great. So there's a lot of things you can do. It's just the general principle is you want to pull your brain away from other types of stimulus and just let it kind of relax.
Yeah. And going back to the point when you said people feel like they have so much to do, they can't take those breaks. But we've all been in that situation where, for example, say you have to travel and you only have 3 hours to get a day's worth of work done. And yet somehow we can all get that work done in 3 hours. And we're always amazed by it, right? It's because we have focus and we put focus on that work. And I know when I do that, I know when I carve out like, okay, 2 hours for this project, an hour for this project, I get it done and I get it done in a better way. Like it turns out better than if I have open-ended timeline. And if I'm just like, kind of messing around with it, because then you're not really focused on it. My brain is looking at other things. My social media apps pop up. I'm distracted by other things. So being focused on that one task for amount of time and then taking a break from all of that, I think is a great idea for everyone to implement.
Yeah. And so a study in the UK looked at like 2,000 workers, and they found that the average worker is doing 2 hours and 57 minutes of work a day.
Yeah.
A day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually because that's about the amount of time, right? It's just under 3 hours. Most people can't go longer than 3 hours. So if they gave themselves a break now, and that's the idea. If you want to work the 3 hour block, you take an hour off, you now have another 3 hour block. You just increased your productivity by 100%. Mm-hmm. And funny story too, when it comes to blocks, because it's awesome that you already know like 2 hours is about your thing. That's why it's a principle of up to 3 hours. It's not like the Pomodoro technique that some people have heard of is like using a timer, work for 20 minutes, take a 4-minute break. And the challenge is that if you're finding yourself in a flow state and totally focused on work and that timer goes off, you've now just interrupted your flow state. So it's designed to give people leeway based on their preference. So like writing this book, I found that an 1.5 hour block was about all I could handle and stay focused on. And that meant I take a 30-minute break. Mike Michalowicz, who's a good friend, who's written a ton of great books for small business owners. He's like a 55, 56-minute type of guy. And then he's got to take a shorter break. And it all works, right? It's awesome once you understand the science. You no longer have the guilt when you take time off because you actually start seeing that break is contributing to future efficiency and productivity. Your quality of work skyrockets, you get more done. And if you look at the math, it's only technically 6 hours. If you're working in 8-hour blocks, like a total 8-hour thing, it's actually 6 hours of work. So you're actually working less, getting a lot more done.
Yeah. And I found too that if you get stuck, like if I'm stuck on a project, I can't think of something, the creativity's not coming, walk away from the project and do something not related to it. And like you said, don't do your emails, don't play a game on your phone, like go for a walk, go exercise, talk to a friend, do something completely unrelated, because that's usually when my ideas will pop into my head of what I can do then.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like your brain just needs a break.
Exactly.
We all need to give our brains a break. So what are some other ways people can implement this? Maybe someone's listening and they're like, I'm an employee, I don't have control over my schedule. What's maybe something that they could do, or maybe they could bring up to their boss to help with this?
I mean, a great thing to bring up to the boss is buy them a gift of the 3.3 rule book.
Yes.
Most companies by law have to give a certain amount of breaks. And I feel like it depends on states is what I've learned. But if you look at those breaks, try to figure out, well, if the break is this long, then that means like you could reverse engineer it, right? If I get a 15-minute break that means I need to work, like I could work an hour, take my 15-minute break, then I work another hour. Maybe I'm close to my lunch break, which is a longer break. Yeah, I would share the same data that we've shared with them. But ultimately, if you don't have control over it, you can reverse engineer from the breaks you do get so that you're strategically placing those breaks to give yourself maximum productivity.
Yeah, love that. What would you say to someone who has never tried this before and they're like, I don't know how long I can go for? What's some tips? Like, how can they get started with this?
Yeah, that's the best part, is like they can literally start the day, like today, as they're hearing this. Just I would first start fresh. So if you're hearing this, you're like, I'm going to try this today. When you start off, start it after a break. So take some sort of time off, whatever that looks like, and then just work. I think most people will find, depending on the task that they're taking on, that is actually the indicator of how long they can handle it. So like for me, which a lot of your listeners might be like, I'm going to throw up. But like, if you give me an Excel file and you want me to pro forma stuff and like forecast and do things, I love that stuff. I could go 3 hours and I'm like, holy cow, 3 hours just passed. I love it. Right. But writing a book is a lot harder for me because it doesn't have numbers, it has words, and I'm better with numbers. And so that's why I found the hour and a half. I think they'll find that it's the task that will dictate how long they want to do. There's not necessarily a technique per se, but it's a self-awareness of, I've been doing this for this long and I can tell that I'm drifting. As soon as you start drifting, that should be an indicator, like, you know what, I think I've reached my limit on this. I'm going to take the break. So I'd probably have a timer. I'd start my timer, and as that goes up, because then I can stop the timer and I can just do math. However long that timer work was, I take 30% of it. I'm going to take that long of a break.
Okay. And I know a lot of people, I think women especially, think we can multitask. Stop doing that, because you are not productive. Stop multitasking. You are not productive doing that. So just stop doing it.
I have shown all the studies to my wife and she refuses to believe it. Yeah. If you want to, I would say, as a woman and a mother, if you want to multitask, use the other part of your day to do that. When you're in work mode, give yourself permission to just focus on one thing at a time. That way, if you think you can multitask, great, keep doing that, but maybe do it outside of work. Don't try to do it with your workload and your work tasks.
Yeah, I agree, because what happens, I think, to most small business owners is they will start working on something and then their phone dings, or a client messages them, or, whatever, some other email pops up and you get distracted. So you turn your attention to what that is. Even if you don't mean to look at the email or answer the client, you get distracted because all that's going on. So if you are going to focus, like my suggestion, and I'm not the expert here, my suggestion is like, flip your phone over, turn your notifications off, put it on do not disturb, put it in a different room from you, get all the beboppy noises off your computer, because you just want to focus for however long you need to on that task. And then again, you can take a break. And right, like you can save the multitasking for at home or like later in the day when you're done with work, but it actually reduces productivity. Multitasking does.
Yeah, and your common sense is spot on. And that's why I love the 3.3 rule, because it is just full of common sense things. Without the 3.3 rule, a lot of us, it's easier to get distracted. My phone rings, like, oh, I got to get to that. With it, you actually are giving yourself and others permission to purposely have time where you're not working. So I can work, and now I know that I'm going to focus, I'm going to stay productive. Now during my break time, yeah, fine, I'll answer that text that I got. I'll look at my notifications to see if any of these things are things that are appropriate during the break, or I need to plan them on later in my day. But you have that time. And the longest amount of time that's going to go from you getting the notification to looking at it is 3 hours. And, a lot of people don't like up to the 3 hours. So they're more of the hour to 2 type of thing. So it's even less. But that's what we found with our team, is that they enjoy the time when they normally were distracted, where they felt guilty, or like they're on their phone huddled over. And if a supervisor walks by, like, oh, I'm working. Now it's fine. If you're on a break, I don't care. Be on a break. Text, talk to people, make phone calls. That's fine. Talk to people. Like, just talking to someone is a great way to use your break time.
Right. I love this. John, where can they get your book?
So it is available to purchase on Amazon. Just Google the 3.3 rule. So there's a dot and 3.3 rule. You can Google my name as well. But that's the best place to purchase the book.
Okay, and all those links, the Amazon link and John's website will be below. So you guys can just pop to the show notes and grab that book from there as well. And we can't wait to continue this conversation with you over on Facebook or Instagram. So make sure to go below, check out our handles. You can ask John any questions once you get his book, or feel free to ask me any questions that you have as well. So John, thank you so much for being on the High Vibe Life podcast.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and we will talk to you all soon. Have a good day.